Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on the future of work in a decentralised landscape. I'm John Ferguson, Practice Lead for New Globalisation at Economist Impact. Hybrid work has been described in the media and by leaders across the world as the great equaliser. However, what will the era of a decentralised internet bring? Building new platforms, products and services, securing partnerships and technology, and identifying use cases and business models will take a lot of time. I'll be asking our great panel today about the potential for new mindsets around decentralisation and how this could create big opportunities for growth in the business as well as culture. So now let me introduce our fantastic panel today. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Paulette Alviti, Chief People Officer at Mondelez International. Next, I'd like to introduce Amber Wisely, Vice President Global Benefits at Intel Corporation. And last but not least, I'd like to welcome John McDonald, Director, Productivity and Collaboration Practice at Google. Paulette, Amber and John, it's really great to have you with us today, and thanks for joining us. So let's start the conversation with, what do we mean by decentralization? Is this technology? Is it data? Is it physically where we work? But Amber, can I start with you, and then I'll bring the others into the conversation. But what do we mean by decentralization? How should we be thinking about this term?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. For us, I think decentralization can mean many things. We were a very distributed workforce pre-COVID, and we continue to be. And we think about decentralization and not just where we work, but how we work, the way in which people think about their work, the type of org structures that people have. So we really think that this idea of democratizing skills and thinking differently about the way we work can really change the way that HR functions bring people together and really think differently about how we support people. Things like onboarding in a decentralized world is a very different practice than maybe it was when it was a very on-site dominated type practice. So we like to think that the opportunity for a decentralized world brings the opportunity for much more innovation. And this is something that we're continuing to watch and monitor at Intel.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Amber. We'll definitely come back to some of those themes. Paulette, decentralization, what does it mean to you? Is it technology? Is it data? Is it physical space? How do you think about this before we get into the details of how to make it work for us?
Yeah, thanks, John. Great to be here with everybody. And if I could, maybe just a quick comment about Mondelez International, so you know who we are. So we're a big global snacking leader. Hopefully, many of our participants here know and love our brands. So Oreo, Cadbury, Ritz, some of the ones that you would know. And the reason I mention that is because that's the type of organization we are. So when we think about decentralization, we're talking about a big global packaged goods company, right? 80,000 employees in 150 different countries. And the way we organize ourselves actually is through a local first operating model. It's been a key to the way we drive growth in the organization. So similar to what Amber said, right, the unlock around innovation is pretty important. And our goal is to try to connect best with our consumers in every market around the globe. And so to do that, we need this combination of global and local. We call it, local first, but not only is kind of the vernacular that we use around Mondelez. And so for us, figuring out, the implications behind this around, promoting that combination between global and local and unlocking this collaborative spirit that we need, right, between the different parts of the organization is really what decentralization is all about for us. And like Amber mentioned, I'll hit just a couple of the same things, right? This idea of, what does this mean in, hybrid work practices now? And what does this mean around driving engagement? We've all seen over the last couple of years, big changes through the pandemic, pre, during, and post. So there's a lot to unpack here as we get into this further.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Paulette, so much. We're definitely going to come back to some of these and unpack those details about how to make this really work for us. But John, from your perspective, decentralization, is it something you're thinking about a lot, working on a lot, talking with your colleagues about how to make it successful for your organization?
100%. But I have to say, Paulette, it's probably organizations like yours that's responsible for some of my weight gain during COVID a little bit, being so close to the Oreos at home all day long. Even though Google fed us, I went from meeting room to meeting room and being in my basement all day was much easier to go to the cupboard. So I'm not blaming you. I think I have, yeah, I have yes, very much enjoying your products. No, it's a great question. Actually, I spend a good chunk of my time speaking with customers around more their technology strategies, but the business aspects always come into it. I think some great points were brought in by the team today around starting to work with remote working teams. And although there are technologies that help solve these problems, it's always about our people. And as we acquire new employees during a time of COVID, and they may be working from home, never have met one another in real life, it's a massive shift, right? Considerations around well-being, our teams working effectively with one another. It's a constant measurement that we see organizations measuring in different ways through pulse surveys, connecting with the management of those teams directly to try to figure out what is the people impact, because it really is the most important thing. And then we pivot to, are we being effective enough, and how do we plan our strategy moving forward, which has a number of elements associated with it. It has considerations around what was being called return to office. I think many organizations now are considering a return to hybrid, or what could the steady state of our organization or the evolution look like moving forward. So very, very interesting topic for me. I obviously work very heavily in technology, and so we start to delve into considerations around choice and security when you go beyond the traditional organization and their infrastructure, and what does it mean for Paulette to be working from home, potentially from her own device, and those types of things. All these considerations, it's been a fascinating couple of years, but it's also brought some amazing, I'd say, innovations to the forefront, which are driving concepts around collaboration equity that were nice to haves previously, and I would say are becoming very quickly need to haves. For all of us in this field.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you so much, John. I definitely want to come back to technology soon, but just park that for a moment and pick up this thread about human beings and culture and our work colleagues. And Amber, maybe if I can come back to you, just this question of culture in a decentralized sort of workforce. And I think we're all, to various degrees, working in global organizations, probably there might be a head office somewhere, regional offices, there might be people even remote, where they maybe don't even have a regional office, but they're just sitting in their own house, for example. How are you, and how should we be thinking about trying to build a culture across our teams, which is really important in such a landscape?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and something I think we'll have to continue to revisit for ever, probably. We have to think about the culture affects the way people work in this new environment, and the way people work in this new environment and how we work affects the culture. So it's a very dynamic relationship between the two, at least for us at Intel. And so we really like to make sure, that we center around our values. Our values are people-centric. We're very inclusive, and we're very results-oriented. And so we like to make sure that the way in which that we work is aligned with those values. And when we have those as our guiding principles, we can then really focus on connecting, creating trust, making sure that we have a results-oriented mindset rather than maybe what was previously a proximity bias mindset, for example. So we see the shifts in culture changing on multiple fronts. An area we're really focused on right now is belonging and trust, how to create those connections in a more distributed world. Again, we already were, and we had those skills to build on, those muscles to build on, rather than, maybe we weren't starting from scratch. But it's continuous progress, it's continuous reevaluation, and it's continuous assessment of what habits do we need to go build to make ourselves stronger, and how are we going to, as John said, continue to pulse our people so we can learn and adjust as we evolve these practices, and make the culture something that's live and dynamic, and something that can really create that exponential power that we think our people can bring to the company.
Thank you so much, Amber. I mean, we're all here talking about innovation at work, and one thing I love about innovation, I'm an economist. Innovation means sometimes we'll make mistakes, or sometimes we'll build things that won't work. So, I mean, Amber, you'd have to maybe mention the mistakes, but some of this is trial and error, right? Trying to build a culture some strategies to bring people together might not work? I mean, are there some things that you've tried that really just haven't worked and you've maybe found better ways of building culture?
Absolutely. As we started this initiative, we realized fundamentally we would have to have a progress over perfection mindset. That kind of became a tagline and a theme for us. And learning and adjusting, right? One of our values is fearless innovation. And for that to be true, for that to be something that can be achieved, we have to have a trial and error mindset. And so we adopt that all the way through our people practices as well. And flexibility comes with trial and error. So when we started we were in the early days of the pandemic, we thought that we would come back to work sooner. And then it was delayed and was delayed. And as we went through that, we had to change some of the ways we set expectations. We had to change our guidelines. We had to really think about the way we communicate and just continue to make that a very active, and again, something that we were learning from. We could not have a fixed mindset as we approach the work, and nor could we ask our employees to have a fixed mindset as they were experiencing these changes. So we continue to be dynamic, John, but overall, it's a progress over perfection. We ask our people, we ask how it's working, we adjust if we need to. A lot of our adjustments have been in conversation guides. How do we talk about flexibility? What do we need? How are we actually staying focused on results orientation? How are we having different conversations in the environment to make sure we can get to the root of an issue if there is an issue or a root of a challenge? So these things are really great challenges for us, they're really great opportunities. And we think if we can approach it with a growth mindset, we have the opportunity to really, again, unleash that power.
Thank you so much, Amber. Paulette, our great panelists have mentioned a few things here, but how are you approaching culture in this decentralized landscape? I mean, we're trying to innovate, the things you're doing that have worked, things you're doing that maybe haven't worked or you pivoted away from.
Yeah, well, I can tell you over the last couple of years, I don't think we've ever spent as much time talking about culture. It's always been important, right? I've been in roles like this for 30 years now and have never really gone through anything like we did the last few years. You know, the state of the workplace has fundamentally changed, right? Our employees, the world is thinking about this differently now. And I don't think it's going to return. Actually, I hope it doesn't return. There is no
but this
normal.
Is good, Paulette, right? I mean, I think this is a good thing. That's just my opinion. But you're doing this a lot longer than me. But I think this is a good thing. The changes we're seeing. I don't know how you feel from your perspective, but talking about culture and paying more attention to well-being and connection and values. I mean, I think this is positive, right?
I couldn't agree more. Right? I mean, you know, we're a big distributed organization. We had a lot of employees in our plants and distribution centers, salespeople, right in the middle of the pandemic. And I'd say a couple of things we learned. One, just the celebration of people, right? What it takes to run our company. And we're so proud of all of our colleagues at Mondelez and what they did to support the consumer, right at the center of what we do. And it sort of took our three values, and I like that Amber sort of hit on those that were important for them. But for us, they're pretty simple, right? Love our consumers and brands, grow every day, and do what's right. And the pandemic just elevated those to a new level. And, you know, when you talk about culture and the importance of putting it front and center, for us, it's all about growth, right? The mindset for the people that work for us to grow their careers, to grow individually, to grow professionally, to grow personally, and as a result, to unlock growth for the company. So we keep coming back to that. And this idea of return to office, I mean, as far as lessons learned, I mean, I don't think anybody got this right out of the gates. I mean, we didn't really know what to expect. Our company and our leadership team, we used technology and we were able to, in a minute, just transition and be very effective working remotely because we're a big global company and was used to operating that way with people in different cities around the globe, et cetera. But what did we find out about the coming back to the office? Well, man, yeah, we had a couple of false starts. I think everybody did. The way we found our way through on this is to stay true to an important principle. We want the flexibility. We saw the benefit of it, and we think everybody in our workplace stands to benefit from it. So that means 50% of the time we want to see people because we want them to be viable in our culture and gain strength and innovation from each other, but the rest of the time, we don't want them commuting or wasting time or not being productive. And I want to hold on to that. I mean, I have 3 kids, and when I was growing up, my husband and I, working with them and the crazy things I did to make sure that I could, do what I needed to do. I want to protect that for the workforce. And I, to your point, there's a lot to like about it. And as a company, Mondelez is leaning into the benefits of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I've got a couple of kids, and hopefully they're being well behaved right now. But let's see during the rest of this conversation. But Paulette, before I come back to John, one concept I've been thinking about as we all think about return to work and hybrid work and getting the balance right, and retaining the flexibility that you rightly talked about, which is a benefit to so many people. I wonder if too the sort of inclusion of people's voices, trying to find the right hybrid, the right balance. I mean, it's probably different for all of our organisations. We're representing 4 organisations here, but I wonder that sense of not just a top-down approach, you must do this, I'm not listening to my team, my staff, or a bit more inclusion, a bit more bringing people together to find that right balance. Is that something that's important?
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that. I mean, boy, we deeply embrace our DEI agenda, right? It's absolutely one of the things that's making our culture a coveted place to come and work. And there's things to consider around this return to office strategy and making sure that people do feel like they're welcome, whether they're in the office or not, right? So using technology is one way to do that. We've come up with some globally adopted principles. We have a flexible working pledge as an example. That's all around, driving work-life balance, as we've already talked about, but it's also attracting more diverse talent, right? This has been a catalyst for people that maybe weren't able to relocate or had, different demands on them, where we can introduce more flexibility, which is opening up the marketplace for us. It's also doing cool things like reducing our environmental impact. How great is that, right? And improving productivity. And we don't need all that productivity. We want some of that to go, to our people, because they've got busy lives and other things going on too. So couldn't agree more. DEI, a major unlock here, and we have to be smart about it and not give it back, I guess. In this drive to go back to the old, I think that's the wrong way to be thinking about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Paulette. John, can I bring you in about this point of culture? I've got 2 worries. I've got lots of worries, but let me just limit it to 2 in this conversation, John. First of all, new joiners to an organisation, when we think about culture and belonging and inclusion. So I worry, you might not be able to tell from my grey hair, but I'm somewhere towards the later end of my career. So I worry about new joiners at the early stages of their career who may not be getting 5 days a week in and all that sort of collaboration and connection with, more experienced people to help them progress in their career. So how do we take care of people at the early stages of their career in terms of culture and inclusion? Then also worry about, John, people sort of maybe that concept of quiet quitting, which I've only just been hearing about over the last 6 months, who are maybe stepping back and not quite feeling, they're bought into the company and their values and things anymore. And I just worry about both of these ends of sort of someone coming in and possibly someone coming out, John. How do you think about culture and in a decentralized workplace taking care of these two areas?
Yeah, I think they're very important questions. I mean, much like the previous responses, we were highly, I would say, decentralized previously from global footprint perspective, working across time zones with a number of different teams in different office locations. But the difference was we were a come to work culture. So we would ask that folks come in. We would feed them with I'm sure Mondelez products, Paulette. I know we've got some Oreo cookies in the Toronto office, but we had certain hooks and things to get people to come to the office to embrace those natural collisions where someone in a completely different department has a conversation with someone in a micro kitchen. And they're able to ideate. And sometimes these ideas have nothing to do with the silo of people they're working with on a day-to-day basis, but there's still value in that ideation and information we can pull from it. So our biggest fear in the return to hybrid was understanding that we're going to have to support this for a period of time. How do we continuously ensure that we can have these natural collisions? And part of that was through the kind of relentless pursuit of inclusion. So getting people to lean into the DEI initiatives, to meet people outside their lines of business around a common learnings, common interests, etc. But it is kind of relentless, putting it in front of people constantly while still balancing the fact that because we're working from home, Paulette alluded to this, working for more hours because we don't have the commute any longer, there is also the information overload and an abundance of training for us anyway. And what I mean by that is there was this over rotation or need to ensure that we were providing all of the information to everyone all of the time so that they felt included. And we realized that didn't equate necessarily to psychological safety. It actually made people feel they might be falling behind on their curriculums. So it's finding that balance that works so well for an organization at the corporate level, within a division of an organization, but in our teams as well. So everyone has a responsibility, and then the people on the team also, we try to empower them with the voice to speak up, put up their hand, and indicate is something's not known. We did a revamp of our something as bold as a revamp of our performance process mid this year here, and we did it deliberately, partially for a constant check-in. We actually call them check-ins with people, so that there is this litmus test. It's not, a twice a year or once a year point in time where we're trying to scramble and figure out all the great things that we'd done that year to speak to our leaders or to speak with our teams about. But it was this constant reminder that folks were there to help develop, remind people what we discussed the last time, and there are resources and other things available to them so they can feel more inclusive in the corporate ecosystem. So, Amber mentioned it before. I don't think it's a point in time thing. I think it's just going to continue to evolve. Cultures will always evolve. You just hope it's evolving in a positive direction that's embracing the corporate responsibilities we'd like to foster.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, John. Emma, maybe it's a good segue back to you. I just want to touch on this quiet quitting at the moment. Am I reading too much into this? Am I seeing these buzzwords and it's not really a thing? Is this something we need to pay attention to and apply the principles of inclusion and working on these things that you've all just nicely discussed? Is this something we need to be wary of at the moment, quiet quitting in maybe remote offices or faraway offices?
I think we always have to be mindful of employee engagement, productivity, and how we demonstrate to our employees that we trust them. I think people want to do great work. And I think as leaders, we have to figure out the best way to tap into that desire, that commitment, that innovation. So I always think we need to think about it. And I think, as Paulette said, right, we don't want to lose flexibility, right? That's a principle we've now come to love, we've come to embrace. It's a value at this point in time. And what we need to do is figure out how we can optimize that for all people. And that means that things will have to be different. We have to meet people where they're at. And it means we have to be inclusive because everybody's different. So I think it's a really powerful opportunity for us, and something we definitely don't want to lose sight of. But I think if we take steps to foster a great culture, and we take steps to listen to their needs, and we take steps to take swift actions and be transparent and find balance, right? And we continue to have a commitment of learning and adjusting, then I think that's what people really want and expect. And if we can achieve that, again, I think we have the power to really tap into a different level of creativity and a different level of connection that really can be something that can foster the next generation of innovation. And I know, as Paulette said earlier, this idea of hanging on to the past, it's so ingrained in us to resist change. And I think we have to think about all of the opportunities that come from change. It's not always easy, it can be difficult, but if we can embrace change and we can bring flexibility into that change, I think that we won't have to be worrying about quiet quitting nearly as much as the media has presented as a concern right now.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you so much, Amber. Paulette, bring you back into the conversation. I wonder this idea of listening to our staff and our teams and our people around the world is obviously really, really important. But that also reminds me of something that Amber spoke about a few minutes ago about a shift in mindset. So what does that mean? Is that people looking at, as a manager, maybe I used to judge our teams by how long they sat in the office next to me. Right? That might have been an old school way of thinking. How many hours are you spending in front of your computer in the office? But is it now about output? Is it now about progress? Is it a shift in mindset that needs to go, how I look at our teams? Is there a necessary shift of mindset that goes along with all these ideas of culture and inclusion?
Yeah, I think most definitely. I think that's coming along, I hope. We learned a lot during the pandemic. I think for most of us, regardless of what industry you may have been in, people delivered, and we weren't watching them every day from, a corner office. So like it or not, the world's changed. And I think the trust that Amber was talking about, I think is more or less been proven. Now, are there ways to sort of gauge productivity and make sure that, there's vehicles to do that? Yes. But, back to the quiet quitting comment, engagement is the key, I think there's maybe a component around capacity that's a challenge, right? I think both John and Amber got at this a little bit, just the workload and the focus on productivity and the strain that the workforce feels that may be attributing to some of what we read about. I know Amber mentioned, I don't think I'll get the words right, but in our vernacular here at Mondelez, we talk about agility over perfection. I know at Intel they had something similar. There's a lot about that, right, around what's changed and why leaders need to think differently now. That we learned that, right, during the last couple of years. So the other thing that I would say that leaders have to think differently about from a mindset is just the importance of connection with their people. And, I had leaders tell me in the middle of the pandemic that, they had never felt as close to their team or their boss than when they were all working remotely. Like, that's such a dichotomy. like, why would that be? Well, that's because we were all focused on it, right? We were legitimately worried about everybody and their families and their lives. And it created a different environment that, frankly, we need to hold on to. This whole discussion around mental well-being, all of this is related. And John, I was glad to hear you kind of mention a little bit about that. But I do think that's more and more important. And back to what you said, John, when you kicked off the session around, what does this mean in a decentralized environment? It means different things in different markets too. So for us, we have a new program that we call the Right You. And the way we sort of crafted that was around three important areas of focus for our colleagues. One is around physical well-being, which has always been understood. One is around mental well-being, which we've shown a much bigger light on over the last couple of years. And the third one is around being connected, back to this point around diversity and inclusiveness. And what that means in, one market, like in South Africa, maybe the focus is on helping our colleagues with retirement planning, whereas in the UK right now we're battling breaking a stigma around mental health, realizing how many people really have been touched by that. Some of our colleagues, our leaders, et cetera. Or in places like the US, this connect focus where people aren't coming back to the office as readily. And this idea of having that be compelling and be purpose-led as to when they do that, that's this connection focus. So I think leaders understanding that and really embracing and leaning into that is how we're going to drive engagement. And if we don't do that, then we're back to that quiet quitting phenomenon, which nobody really wants to find themselves stuck in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paula. I'm going to turn to John. John, I'm going to test a theory with you, and you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong. After all these great points that you guys have made, if a company is not putting effort into culture, diversity, inclusion, connection, focusing on well-being and mental health, as Paulette just described. If a company just says, we did that in COVID, we're not doing it anymore, I would like to think as an economist, you're not going to have as many people coming to your organization looking for work, looking for a job. You may therefore have to pay them more to offset not offering the sort of flexibility and the connection and the culture that we've just talked about. Am I wrong in that assumption? It feels like to me, if companies aren't doing these things we've just spent 15, 20 minutes talking about, then basically as an economist, you have to pay them more to compensate for not having these things in place. John, is that a reasonable assumption, or am I off base here?
No, you're wrong. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But it happened prior to COVID. It was already happening. I think COVID it was a catalyst for what we're seeing. I spoke with so many organizations that were worried, engineering firms that were worried about a brain drain, for not really compensation, but just quality of life and balance within other organizations. We've seen a lot of folks pivot to nimble or agile startups where they felt that they would have more creative license. So we saw that happening prior to COVID. I think what COVID did was it gave people a new space to think about what they wanted in their lives and in their careers when working at home with their families. I had a gentleman from my team who decided to travel the world for a year and a half, and he picked up his 3-year-old daughter and said, maybe we'll never get another chance. I think people, as a result of the pandemic, started to question certain things that had been buried for quite some time, but I don't know that it was different. Again, it was an accelerant to the way people were really feeling. Now, as we move forward, 100%, it's a consideration. We think about it constantly. Are we not only acquiring the right people, but are they happy with what they're doing and their environment? Are we providing them the right tools and opportunities to grow within not just the organization, but within their teams? And if they don't have the ability to do that, can we help them find that in other teams within the company? So I would say it's definitely an opportunity for organizations to take a close look at this and what they're doing, but it's constant, and I think it's just on a faster course as a result of some organizations providing even greater flexibility than others that can be more attractive for some people, especially to Paulette's earlier point, raising a small family. I also have 3 kids. When you're in a situation where you have to balance certain priorities in your life, and then you were afforded those abilities, it shows you that it exists and it can exist. And I think organizations are having to pivot in a lot of cases.
Absolutely. No, I agree. Amber, maybe I can bring you back in here. From everything I've heard you all talk about, which makes a lot of sense to me, I also get the impression that this takes a lot of work from all of you, people in HR functions, chief people officers, these sort of functions in companies. I can imagine there's a lot more effort and a lot more work going into how to make this all work in a decentralized landscape. Maybe we don't have it perfect, but I just imagine that this level of work now, this level of focus, is probably going to, for the good companies, for the best companies, probably going to stay around that level of work now for the foreseeable future. What do you think, Amber? Is that right?
I think so. I think that we have to keep care for our employees at the center of what we do for any big company to be successful at this point, or any small company for that matter, right? We have to care for people. We have to make sure that we're meeting their needs. We have to figure out ways to do that at the same time as optimizing productivity. And right now, it's working. Our people, at least for Intel, right, our people are demonstrating that they can be productive, and they feel that they get the work and life balance, if you will, able to sort of satisfy those needs that John just spoke about. They've seen it happen, they experienced it, and they want that to continue. So I think that we have to keep mental well-being at the front and center. I think we have to keep flexibility at the center. And I think we have to keep efforts to make sure we're listening and adjusting at the front and center of the way we do work and approach our work. Now, that doesn't necessarily need to be a big lift. If we're very thoughtful about it, we can build that into other practices, things that we're already doing to survey our employees, things we're already doing to make sure we're listening and building trust. So I think we can converge activities and just be more purposeful and intentional in the way we do that. But I absolutely think that we have to keep care at the center of what we do in order to really tap into, again, their creativity and their productivity.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Amber. I wonder if we can just pivot now in the last 10 minutes or so, but just touch on technology for a few minutes. Amber, how do people work through making technology work for them, explore different platforms. I imagine it depends on the sector and the product that the company is involved in, or the service that the company is involved in. But I imagine there's been a lot of experimentation over the last couple of years with new technologies, new platforms. Is this something that people are putting effort into, thinking about how technology aligns with culture and mindset and all the other things we've just spoken about?
Absolutely. I think when we started this early on, again, we realized immediately our IT departments were absolutely amazing in being able to change the technology so we could all work remotely. It was an extraordinary effort, and made huge differences. And since then, we have been able to continue to experiment. I think our software continues to get more advanced in different capabilities to work asynchronously, to work through different platforms that enable us to better understand where people might be, how when they're going to be together. So I think we're still at the early stages of that. I think this is going to be a multi-year transition, a period of innovation in our technology products. I'm very optimistic for that. Fundamentally, we believe we have an opportunity to create seamless collaboration wherever we are. And I think that's something that's going to, again, just propel innovation in an entirely new way. So for us, we're very optimistic about it. We're going to continue to experiment with different technologies, try things out, get input from people, and see how that goes so we can continue to progress this idea.
Yeah, thank you, Amber. Paulette, I want to ask you a similar question. How are people approaching technologies? I imagine, again, there's trial and error. Don't let perfection get in the way of good results. But yeah, how are you looking at technology, or how have you been experiencing technology, trying to connect people and help us all be productive over the last couple of years? How are you thinking about technology?
Well, it's a big platform. I mean, we were just having a conversation about inclusion and at the same time talking about productivity. So, we have to be able to do both. So this idea of care and attention and all the things that we need to do as a people team. Yeah, but I also, I'm accountable to the CFO and the CEO and our shareholders, and I need to find ways to be able to do that in a cost-effective way that won't impact the care and attention to the workforce. So how do we do that? Well, the biggest lever is going to be digital, right? And our ability to make a strong pivot. I mean, Mondelez we're making a big investment behind this as a company. Our new strategies to get us to be the digital snacks leader by 2030 is going to call for $1 billion investment. Yeah, it's big. There'll be a portion of that helps support our employee experience. And we have learned through all of this as we adopt different technologies. I mean, there's an expectation that the tools that we use for the people team, they have to be held to the same standard as what our colleagues expect from the technologies they use in their everyday life. So the user interface has to be as good as, the airline app or the shopping tools that they use. So that's a pretty high bar for an internal function. So there's a fair amount of work that has to happen there. So the things that we're looking at and thinking about are things like user experience, things like making sure that the tools that we adopt can have a global standard, but can also be flexible locally, because we just had this whole conversation, right, about decentralization. They need to be productivity accelerators. They have to be smart ways for us to deliver capacity to people, and also, smarter use of our resources so that we can redeploy them into other high value areas. And they have to be responsive to the consumer and the customer. I mean, we're a consumer company, so the faster we get real-time data, whether that's, for our marketers or our salespeople or for our people team, we can better flex and pinpoint better solutions, right? Whether that's staffing resources or engagement models like we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much, Paulette. John, I'd like to come to you. I mean, you sit in one of the world's biggest tech companies, so maybe this is a silly question, but your clients, your customers, your partners, how have you seen them experiment with technology to connect people, to build culture? What are some of the things you've seen from your perspective about how people are using technology?
So, I mean, this is what I talk about every day. So a lot to say on this topic. Like Amber was alluding to, I think many organizations were in the same boat where they, as a result of COVID, pivoted and were able to enable their users to work from home effectively. And a lot of that had to do with security requirements, but then a fast follow to ensure that our users were doing okay with what we put in their hands. And then constant check-ins around productivity. The first iterations of that showed that monitoring how much someone's doing email, how many emails Amber sends in a day, is not a good measurement, and actually doesn't promote the right cultures for most organizations. It doesn't create psychological safety, nor is it a measure of how the quality of the work that Amber's bringing to the table. So with the companies I've been working with, I do urge them to ask their users, because there are a number of factors. A lot of these solutions traditionally have been put in place by the IT teams that we trust to put them in place. And as long as the environment is secure and there aren't a high degree of support tickets, it's safe enough to assume that that's working well. But there are many variables around the change in demographics, right? Consumer experience that the team was hinting at earlier, best solutions for remote work, and solutions that pivot to perform as well on potentially a 13-inch surface sitting at someone's kitchen table as potentially 2 screens in an office somewhere. So all of these variables have really lent to the decisioning around technology that organizations want to not only test for their users, but also invite their users to provide feedback to the organization as to potential solutions that exist that they haven't been considering, i.e., are you missing certain technology solutions to do your job on a daily basis? And those things will be largely driven by their experiences outside of work, or their experiences prior to coming to work within that organization. So it is a constant conversation that we're having with companies, and we're also doing quite a bit ourselves to ensure that we can continue to augment, like, what is the stair-step innovation to potentially make this environment here, like all of us having this conversation today, feel like we're right here with one another, right? How can we make it even more immersive than it is? And we get a lot of questions around even things like the metaverse and how organizations are planning for that. So a lot to come, but a lot of it, again, a catalyst is this work from home or forced work from anywhere that's really contributing to the steep innovation curve and thinking in this area.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much, John. I really appreciate it. So we're coming to the end. So question without notice, just, quick fire, quick summary. If I can take it each in turn. Paulette, what would you say is one, key message you just want to repeat for our great audience that we discussed today? If you had to get across one message, what would it be?
No, just how appreciative we all need to be, right, to our workforce, right? How fast they've adapted and how they've responded. And I think the role that we play running the companies that we do and nurturing that, using the right technology, coming up with the right engagement strategies, and making the investments in people, right? That's vital to a company's bottom line, to be able to hold and retain people and create the workforce where people can feel like they can contribute fully, right? That's key. And yeah, it's a lot of work. You were mentioning that earlier. So to all the People Team colleagues, that are listening to this, or to John and Amber, it's been sort of the era, if you will, for human resources in a way, right? Really testing how to respond and support the companies. So it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Paulette. Amber, a key takeaway or a key highlight that you'd like to share with everyone?
I agree with everything Paulette just said, and I would just add, maybe we have to continue to be employee-centric and figure out ways to learn and adjust as we progress through this evolution of the future of work, whether it's hybrid or the next evolution. We've got to continue to learn and evolve and find ways to optimize productivity in a way that meets the needs of our people.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much, Amber. John, last word.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that Paulette and Amber just said. I think that because it's constantly evolving, we need to remember that the fear of unknown, the fear of change, it shouldn't paralyze us and our organizations from evolving, because it's inevitable, right? We witness beautiful outcomes through positive transformation, and so we have to remind ourselves of that, even though it's uncomfortable over time. We need to continuously ensure that we're checking in with our people resources, which are the most valuable part of our organization, to make sure we're getting it right.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much, John. I really, really appreciate it. So session's come to an end, but I just want to sum up very, very quickly. I think my takeaway message listening to our great panelists tonight is you can't just think about culture separately to mindset, separately to technology, separately to diversity and inclusion. It feels like to me, and I've been wrong before, I hope I'm not wrong now, but it feels like we need to deal with all these things at the same time to try and achieve the best outcomes for our businesses. But that's just my key takeaway. There's a lot on our plates and your plates, but trying to deal with all these things and finding the right ways to bring them all together sounds like a bit of a successful strategy to me. But all that's left for me to do now is to really thank very much Paulette, Amber and John for joining us, and for our audience, thanks so much for spending time. Innovation at Work is a great event, and honestly, I think we'll be discussing these things for quite a few years to come. But thanks so much for joining us, and wherever you are, take care. Thanks, everyone.